Hey guys, tonight we're diving deep into the invisible architecture of emotional control, into the mechanisms that govern how you feel, react, and respond to everything life throws at you. These aren't motivational platitudes or surface-level advice. This is the psychology behind manipulation, influence, and self-mastery that most people never consciously recognize, let alone learn to redirect. Before we begin, if you find value in this kind of content, go ahead and like the video and subscribe, but only if it genuinely resonates with you. And drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. I'm always curious to know who's out there, awake or drifting off, absorbing this with me. Now, get comfortable. Adjust your position, dim the lights, let the world outside fade into background noise. We're about to explore 50 psychological principles, some ancient, some cutting-edge, that reveal how emotions are built, borrowed, and controlled. From the neurological hijacks that steal your calm, to the linguistic patterns that rewrite your reality, to the shadow parts of yourself you've been taught to ignore. Some of this might unsettle you. Some of it might feel like permission you've been waiting for. All of it is drawn from neuroscience, behavioral psychology, and the darker edges of social influence. This isn't about becoming emotionless. It's about becoming aware. Because awareness is where control begins. So let's ease into this journey together and see what shifts when you finally understand the invisible forces shaping your emotional world. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Illusions of Control. The first lie the mind tells, that you are in control. Trick 1. The Invisible Hand. You think you're steering your emotions. You think you decide when to stay calm, when to get angry, when to smile politely. But you don't. Most of what you call choice is a carefully delayed echo, the mind catching up to what the body has already done. Neuroscientists once placed electrodes on subjects' brains and told them to lift their fingers whenever they chose. What they found shattered the illusion of free will. The brain's motor cortex activated half a second before the person became conscious of their decision. Half a second. That's all it took to prove that your feeling of control arrives late, after the decision is already made. This is the invisible hand that guides you. Not logic, not reason, but emotion, silent, swift, and ancient. Your brain evolved long before language or moral codes. When danger appeared, it didn't have time to think. It had to react instantly, and so it built a shortcut. That shortcut became your emotional brain, the limbic system. Every flash of irritation, every rush of fear, every spark of attraction, they rise before you can intervene. You call it instinct, but it's not mystical. It's mechanical. You say, I lost my temper. But really, your temper found you first. The only moment of power you truly have is what comes after. The pause between stimulus and response. That pause is sacred. It's the narrow space where emotional control begins. Imagine this. Someone insults you. Before your mind can form a sentence, your body reacts. Your heart rate climbs, your jaw tightens, your pupils narrow. You feel it. The ancient machinery roaring awake. Most people live their lives chained to that machinery, reacting on autopilot, justifying afterward with logic that never really led the way. But awareness changes everything. The moment you notice, I'm being triggered, something subtle happens. You create a gap, a fraction of a second where choice returns. In that space, you can breathe. You can observe. And for the first time, you are not the reaction. You are the one watching it. That's where mastery begins, not in fighting emotion, but in seeing it rise without being consumed. The invisible hand still moves, but now, you can watch it without obeying. Trick 2. The amygdala hijack. Deep in your brain sits a structure the size of an almond, the amygdala. It doesn't think. It reacts. Its only purpose, to keep you alive. It has no patience for nuance or calm reasoning. When it senses danger, real or imagined, it hijacks the system. Your pulse races. Your breath shortens. Blood leaves the prefrontal cortex, the seat of logic, and floods the muscles. You've been taken hostage by your own biology. This is called the amygdala hijack, a term coined by psychologist Daniel Goleman. It's what happens when emotion overpowers cognition. Think of an argument where you said something cruel, something you later regretted. In that moment, your amygdala pulled the trigger before reason could intervene. You didn't choose anger. Anger chose you. The problem is, the amygdala can't distinguish between real threat and emotional discomfort. To your brain, a raised eyebrow from someone you admire feels almost as threatening as a predator in the wild. And so the body responds the same way: fight, flight, or freeze. You can't stop the hijack entirely. It's ancient, it's fast, but you can learn to intercept it. The key lies in conscious breathing. It sounds almost too simple, and that's why most people ignore it. But it's the most direct way to tell your nervous system, you are safe. When you exhale slowly, longer than you inhale, you activate the parasympathetic system, the body's natural brake pedal. Heart rate slows. Cortisol drops. The amygdala calms. You reclaim the driver's seat. It's ironic. You can't argue your way out of an emotional hijack, but you can breathe your way out. Next time your chest tightens, try this. Don't talk. Don't defend. Don't explain. Just breathe, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Again and again, you'll feel your body softening, your mind returning. The fire cools. The fog clears. Control doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you don't let feeling turn you into something you're not. The amygdala will always be there, but so will the breath. And the breath is older, wiser. It was your first act when you entered this world, and it will be your last when you leave it. So breathe, and reclaim what evolution took away: peace in the presence of chaos. Trick 3. The mirror reflex. You are not as separate as you think. Every time you talk to someone, a friend, a stranger, a lover, your nervous systems begin to mirror one another. Tiny muscles in the face copy expressions. Heart rates align. Even breathing synchronizes. This is the mirror reflex, the reason emotions spread faster than logic ever could. Walk into a tense room, and you feel it instantly. No words exchanged, but your body knows. That's because it's wired to imitate the emotional energy it detects. The purpose is survival. Empathy evolved to help early humans cooperate. But in the modern world, this reflex makes you vulnerable. When you absorb others' emotions unconsciously, you become a reflection, not a being. You inherit their moods, their anxieties, their urgency. You think you're having a bad day, but maybe you just caught someone else's. Emotional independence begins when you start noticing this mirroring. Next time you're around someone anxious, notice what happens inside you. Do your shoulders tense? Does your breath shorten? If so, pause. Observe the sensation, not as yours, but as borrowed energy. This is how you stop the contagion. You breathe slower. You soften your gaze. You relax the micro muscles of your face. The other person's nervous system picks up on it and starts to mirror you. Calm becomes contagious too. In that moment, you're not absorbing, you're influencing. That's emotional power in its quietest form. You're no longer a puppet of the room's energy. You are the metronome, setting the rhythm. This is how leaders, therapists, and empaths maintain control without dominance. They don't resist emotion, they redirect it. You can feel someone's chaos without letting it rewrite your piece. And the more you practice this, the more you realize your calm is not just yours. It's a gift you give to everyone who enters your field. Trick 4. The narrative trap. Every emotion you've ever felt began as a story. You don't react to reality. You react to the interpretation of it. Imagine someone doesn't text you back. The mind rushes to fill the silence. They're ignoring me. They must be upset. They've lost interest. Suddenly, a blank screen becomes a storm. But the reality? They could be driving, or asleep, or just busy living their own life. The emotional suffering doesn't come from the event. It comes from the story you attach to it. This is the narrative trap, the mind's desperate attempt to make meaning, even when none exists. The brain abhors uncertainty, so it fabricates stories to feel safe. But those stories often hurt more than the truth ever could. Emotional mastery is not about silencing the story. It's about questioning it. When you feel hurt, stop and ask, what story am I telling myself right now? That question is a scalpel. It cuts through illusion. Because maybe they didn't reject you. Maybe they were never yours to lose. Maybe you're not being attacked. Maybe someone else is just in pain. The ability to reframe is one of the most powerful emotional skills you can learn. It's the quiet alchemy of turning reactivity into reflection. Reframing doesn't change reality. It changes your relationship with it. It turns every setback into data, every insult into information, every silence into space for clarity. So next time you feel the rush of anger or shame or sadness, pause. Step back. Ask, what if the story isn't true? And in that moment, you'll feel something strange. The emotion that once felt heavy starts to dissolve. Because truth doesn't need to be defended. It only needs to be seen. Trick 5. The ego's throne. Inside your mind, there's a voice that always wants to be right. It hates being questioned. It demands recognition. It flares up when you're criticized, even gently. That's the ego, the emotional guardian of identity. Its job is simple. Protect your sense of self at all costs. It doesn't care if it makes you miserable. It just wants to preserve its crown. The ego confuses discomfort with danger. Someone disagrees, and it feels like an attack. Someone outshines you, and it whispers, "You're not enough." But here's the paradox. The more you defend the ego, the less control you actually have. Because every time you react to protect it, you hand over your emotional sovereignty. The ego thrives on noise, arguments, pride, validation. It feeds on attention. So the fastest way to weaken it is silence. When you feel the urge to prove, to defend, to win, stop. Breathe. Don't speak. Let the ego starve for a moment. Watch the discomfort rise, then fall. You'll notice something. The world doesn't collapse when you stay silent. In fact, it expands. Because now, you're no longer protecting an image. You're preserving peace. The ego is loud, but awareness is louder. Every time you choose calm over defense, truth over pride, you dethrone it a little more. True control isn't about domination. It's about surrendering the need to always be right. When the ego bows, awareness rises. And from that silence, you'll begin to feel a deeper power, the kind that doesn't need recognition to exist. Chapter 2. The Psychology of Influence. The mind is a negotiation between what you want and what the world wants from you. Here, we uncover the subtle mechanisms people use, consciously or not, to bend emotions, beliefs, and behavior. Trick 6. The mirror weapon. Influence doesn't begin with persuasion. It begins with reflection. When someone mirrors your tone, posture, or rhythm, your nervous system relaxes. It feels like recognition, a silent whisper that says, "You and I are alike." And that whisper bypasses logic. This is the mirror weapon, a technique so subtle, you'll never see it, only feel it. Psychologists call it non-conscious mimicry, and it operates deep beneath awareness. When a person imitates your gestures or pace, your brain releases oxytocin, the chemical of connection. You start to like them without knowing why. You drop your guard. You listen longer. You agree faster. Politicians use it. Therapists use it. Manipulators perfect it. Imagine sitting across from someone who slightly leans forward when you do. They speak softly when you soften. They pause when you pause. Within minutes, you begin to feel understood, even if no real understanding exists. The danger isn't in the imitation. It's in what follows. Because once trust is built on rhythm instead of truth, logic becomes irrelevant. Awareness is your defense. The next time you sense perfect synchronization, a stranger finishing your sentences, matching your tempo, mirroring your smile, pause. Take a breath. Ask yourself, do they understand me, or are they studying me? True influence doesn't imitate your rhythm. It respects your silence. Trick 7. The authority echo. The human mind has a built-in weakness. It listens differently when power speaks. Authority doesn't need to prove truth. It sounds like it. And this illusion runs deep in the brain. In the 1960s, psychologist Stanley Milgram conducted one of the most chilling experiments in history. Ordinary people were instructed by a scientist in a lab coat to deliver electric shocks to another person for wrong answers. They believed the shocks were real. Most participants obeyed, even when the person screamed in pain. Why? Because the voice of authority echoed louder than their conscience. That's the authority echo. a psychological resonance where perceived expertise overrides personal judgment. When someone carries symbols of status, uniforms, titles, confidence, the emotional brain tags them as safe to follow, and logic falls silent. You see this daily. A CEO's tone can silence an entire room. A doctor's confidence can override a patient's intuition. Even on social media, follower counts act as digital uniforms, numbers replacing credibility. But here's the dark truth. The echo doesn't require real authority, only the appearance of it. Confidence becomes costume. Certainty becomes weapon. And obedience, once emotional, feels rational. The art of emotional control lies not in rejecting authority, but in slowing your automatic submission to it. When a voice demands agreement, don't resist, observe. Feel the pull. Feel how your body wants to comply. Then ask, if this person wore no symbols, if they spoke with no certainty, would their words still hold power? True wisdom doesn't echo. It questions the silence between commands. Trick 8. The consensus mirage. Sometimes, power doesn't speak from the top. It whispers from the crowd. Humans are social creatures. Our brains are wired to read emotional safety in numbers. When many people believe something, we assume it must be true. That's the consensus mirage, the illusion of truth born from repetition and agreement. We conform, not because we're weak, but because isolation once meant death. The tribe's belief was survival. In modern life, the tribe is everywhere. It's in online comments, trending hashtags, applause, and silence. You scroll through opinions and feel an invisible tug. Maybe they're right. Your uncertainty softens. Their certainty hardens. And just like that, belief becomes contagious. In 1951, psychologist Solomon Asch demonstrated this with a simple experiment. Participants were asked to match the length of a line with one of three options. The answer was obvious, yet when actors in the room unanimously chose the wrong one, 75% of real participants conformed at least once. They saw the truth, but they doubted their own eyes. That's the consensus mirage. It doesn't manipulate logic. It manipulates loneliness. When we fear standing apart, we surrender inner truth for outer peace. We nod along. We post what's safe. We think in borrowed opinions. And the cost is subtle, the erosion of emotional independence. To master your emotions is to master your belonging. To listen to the noise of the crowd, yet still trust the quiet voice that speaks when you're alone. The next time you feel the world pushing you toward a belief, stop. Ask, is this truth or comfort disguised as consensus? Real awareness doesn't need agreement. It just needs silence, courage, and time. Trick 9. The attention parasite. Every mind hungers for attention. It's not vanity, it's survival. To be ignored once meant danger. In the ancient world, invisibility was exile. The tribe's eyes confirmed your existence. Their recognition said, you belong. But that ancient hunger never left. It simply evolved, from campfires to screens. Now, attention isn't survival. It's dopamine. And whoever controls your attention controls your emotions. That's the attention parasite. It feeds on your need to be seen. It rewards you with validation, then drains you with expectation. Every like, every glance, every nod of approval becomes a small electric shock to the brain. Pleasure dressed as acceptance. Manipulators understand this instinct better than most. They offer you recognition like breadcrumbs, just enough to keep you following. A compliment, a curious text, a sudden silence. Each signal pulls your emotional focus closer to them. You start thinking in their direction, wondering what they think of you, adjusting your tone, your choices, your peace, just to remain visible in their world. Attention becomes the currency of control. You give more of yourself just to feel seen again. In relationships, this parasite shows up as emotional intermittent fasting. One moment, they flood you with warmth. The next, they disappear. Your nervous system, addicted to contrast, begins to chase the highs. You start confusing unpredictability for depth. And in that chase, you lose the calm rhythm of self-attention. The truth is, attention feels like love, but it's not the same thing. Love nourishes. Attention consumes. To master your emotions, You must learn to starve the parasite. Detach your sense of worth from being noticed. Pull your focus inward. Notice your breath instead of their silence. Notice your thoughts instead of their absence. The less you need to be seen, the harder it becomes for anyone to control you. The most powerful form of emotional control is not indifference. It's sovereignty. You still care, but you no longer depend. Because when you no longer crave to be seen, you begin to truly see. Trick 10. The empathy snare. Empathy is beautiful, but beauty has its traps. To understand someone deeply is to open the door to their emotions, and sometimes that door doesn't close when it should. That's the empathy snare. The invisible moment when compassion turns into surrender. When you feel another's pain so vividly that you forget where they end and you begin. The manipulator's genius lies here, not in cruelty, but in your kindness. They sense your desire to understand, your instinct to heal. So they turn their wounds into anchors. They weaponize vulnerability. You tell yourself you're helping. You listen, you absorb, you bend your boundaries for peace. But slowly, your empathy becomes a leash. You don't want to upset them. You start walking on emotional eggshells. You excuse their outbursts because you know what they've been through. And that's the moment they stop needing control, because you've already given it. The empathy snare doesn't always come from malice. Sometimes it's unconscious. People recreate their pain and pull others into it without even knowing. But the result is the same. You carry emotions that don't belong to you. Real empathy doesn't mean absorbing another's chaos. It means understanding it without becoming it. Imagine a candle lighting another. Both burn, but neither extinguishes. That's healthy empathy. But when you dim your own flame just to keep someone else's alive, that's surrender. To master emotional control, you must learn compassionate distance. To care without collapsing. To understand without absorbing. To love without losing yourself in the process. You can listen to their pain without inhaling it. You can see their story without stepping into their role. And once you learn that, empathy transforms from a weakness into wisdom. It stops being a leash. It becomes a light. Chapter 3. The Shadow Mind. You cannot master your emotions until you meet the parts of yourself you've been taught to ignore. Trick 11. The Repressed Self. You can't control what you refuse to face. And yet, that's what most people spend their lives trying to do. Control without confrontation. We call it being polite, being positive, staying calm. But suppression isn't calmness. It's silence under pressure. And silence eventually breaks. Psychiatrist Carl Jung called this the shadow, the hidden parts of your psyche that you deny, reject, or bury because they don't fit the image you show the world. The envy you won't admit. The anger you dismiss as not like me. The selfishness you hide behind generosity. All of it gets pushed down where it ferments. But repression doesn't erase energy. It just buries it alive. Every time you suppress a truth about yourself, it waits, quietly, to return in disguise. A slip of the tongue, a sudden irritation, a dream that doesn't leave you, an emotional overreaction that makes no sense. That's not loss of control. That's the shadow speaking. You can meditate, journal, breathe deeply. But if your peace depends on keeping parts of yourself gagged, then your calm is only camouflage. True emotional mastery begins when you allow the shadow to exist without letting it drive. You don't need to fix it, just see it. When you can say, yes, I have rage. Yes, I crave validation. Yes, I am jealous sometimes, the shadow loses its teeth. Awareness dissolves its power. It's not about becoming better. It's about becoming whole. Because what you suppress controls you. But what you face releases you. Trick 12. The emotional echo. Not every emotion belongs to the present moment. Some are echoes, old vibrations from the past, bouncing inside your nervous system, waiting for a place to land. You think you're angry at a stranger cutting you off in traffic. But the anger was already there, years old, simply awakened by something familiar. You think you're heartbroken over a message left unanswered. But the ache began long before, in another rejection, another silence. Most of what we call overreaction is actually repetition. The body remembers what the mind tries to forget. Neuroscientists call this emotional memory, experiences stored not as words, but as sensations. When a current event mirrors an old wound, your body doesn't see the difference. It reacts as if the past is happening again. That's why calm people explode over small things. Why confident people crumble over minor criticism. Why love can feel terrifying when it's safe. Your nervous system doesn't live in time. It lives in patterns. And until you trace your reactions back to their origin, you'll keep mistaking old echoes for new storms. So the next time you feel that surge, anger, jealousy, fear, pause. Ask softly, how old is this feeling? If it feels bigger than the moment, it's not from the moment. It's an echo. Healing isn't about silencing these echoes. It's about listening to them, fully, until they stop repeating. Sit with the discomfort instead of running from it. Because when you listen long enough, the echo tells you where it began. And in that understanding, the loop ends. Emotional mastery isn't suppression, it's archaeology. You dig beneath the reaction, find the fossil of an older pain, hold it up to the light, and finally say, I see you. You can rest now. Trick 13. The projection illusion. The human mind is a mirror that doesn't know it's a mirror. We see in others the things we can't bear to see in ourselves. When you judge someone for being arrogant, manipulative, or lazy, you're often reacting to a shadow reflection. Something within you recognizes the trait. Something within you resists admitting it. So the mind expels it outward. That's projection. It's not evil. It's protective. The ego says, it's not me, it's them. It keeps the self-image clean, but it blinds you from truth. Projection is why relationships become mirrors instead of meeting places. You fall for people who carry your hidden parts. You fight with people who reflect your unresolved emotions. You attract what you deny until you stop denying it. That coworker who irritates you. Maybe they embody the ambition you suppress. That friend you pity. Maybe they mirror the weakness you're terrified of revealing. Even your idols project something. The confidence, the power, the freedom you haven't claimed yet. You can't master your emotions while fighting your own reflection, because every judgment is self-revelation in disguise. The next time someone triggers you, pause the story about them. Ask instead, what is this showing me about myself? If you feel contempt, maybe there's envy beneath it. If you feel superiority, maybe there's insecurity beneath it. If you feel righteous anger, maybe there's shame hiding under your certainty. To see the world clearly, you must clean the mirror, not the reflection. That's the paradox of the shadow. It hides inside the people you dislike the most, which means your greatest teachers often appear as your greatest enemies. Emotional mastery isn't about eliminating judgment. It's about decoding it. Every irritation is an invitation to awareness. Every reaction is a signpost pointing inward. And when you finally follow those signposts into your envy, your pride, your fear, you don't become darker. You become freer. Because what you once saw as flaws in others were simply fragments of yourself, asking to be seen. Trick 14. The guilt loop. Guilt is one of the mind's most sophisticated prisons. It doesn't need chains or guards. It only needs your cooperation. When you feel guilty, it creates the illusion of moral control, as if punishing yourself is the same as doing good. You replay the mistake again and again, thinking that by suffering enough, you'll balance the scale. But guilt doesn't balance anything. It just feeds on repetition. The truth is simple. You punish yourself to feel moral. It's a control mechanism dressed as virtue. In childhood, you were rewarded for remorse. You were taught that guilt equals goodness, that feeling bad means you care. But this conditioning lingers long after the lesson's purpose fades. As adults, we often cling to guilt not because it helps us grow, but because it helps us feel safe. It gives the illusion that you're still a good person, that you're not the villain in your own story. But guilt, when left unchecked, becomes a circular trap, a loop. You feel guilt, you self-punish, you feel purified for a moment, and then guilt returns stronger than before. Because your mind learns that suffering equals redemption. And so it keeps creating reasons to suffer. At its core, guilt is about control, not morality. You think you're controlling your behavior through guilt, but really, guilt is controlling you. It decides when you're allowed to rest, when you're allowed to forgive, when you're allowed to move on. That's why awareness is liberation. When you see guilt as a reaction, not a moral compass, it loses its power. Guilt often disguises deeper emotions, shame, regret, or fear of rejection. You fear what others would think if they saw your flaws, so you preemptively punish yourself. You play both the role of the sinner and the judge, hoping that self-penance will earn you mercy. But mercy doesn't come from punishment. It comes from understanding. Ask yourself, did I harm, or did I simply fail to meet my impossible standards? Did I act out of malice, or out of ignorance and fear? Most guilt is not about hurting others. It's about betraying the image you've created of yourself. And that image, that idealized version of who you think you should be, is often the real tyrant. When you notice yourself drowning in guilt, don't ask, how do I fix this? Ask, what is this guilt trying to protect? Sometimes guilt protects your ego. Sometimes it protects your attachments. Sometimes it hides the fear that, without punishment, you'd never learn. But the truth is, you do not grow through pain. You grow through awareness. To break the loop, you must stop rewarding guilt with attention. Stop rehearsing it. Stop turning it into identity. Instead, observe it. Name it. I feel guilty, not because I've done wrong, but because my mind fears losing control. That's how guilt dissolves, not through forgiveness from others, but through understanding from yourself. Freedom from guilt doesn't mean becoming careless. It means becoming conscious. It means you act from responsibility, not from fear. And once you stop punishing yourself for being human, you begin to live like one. Trick 15. The inner critic's mask. There's a voice inside your head that sounds like truth. It tells you you're not enough, that you should have done more, that you'll never measure up. You mistake this voice for your own, but it's not yours. It's inherited shame, the internalized echo of every judgment you've ever absorbed. Parents, teachers, peers, each left a small imprint on your self-image, shaping how you speak to yourself. Over time, those imprints merged into one voice, the inner critic. This critic wears a mask of wisdom. It claims to be helping you, pushing you toward excellence, keeping you humble, making sure you don't fail. But what it really does is keep you small, because it thrives on comparison. It thrives on the illusion that you're one mistake away from worthlessness. It keeps you chasing approval that never arrives. You think the critic is your conscience. But conscience guides, the critic condemns. Conscience speaks once, clearly and calmly. The critic never shuts up. That's how you know the difference. The inner critic isn't born from self-awareness. It's born from survival. When you were young, you learned that love was conditional. Approval depended on performance. Affection came after obedience. So your mind created an internal parent, one who scolds before anyone else can. It criticizes you first to protect you from external rejection. But this protection comes at a cost: peace. You begin to live under constant self-surveillance, censoring your own emotions, editing your own thoughts. You mistake hypervigilance for responsibility. You mistake fear for discipline. The truth is, that harsh voice isn't making you better, it's keeping you afraid. To unmask the critic, you must learn to listen without obeying. You hear the voice say, "You're not enough," and instead of fighting it, you simply notice it. You treat it like a stranger, not a dictator. That moment of separation is everything. Because when you no longer identify with the critic, it begins to lose its authority. You start to see where its words come from. The tone of your father's disappointment, the sharpness of a teacher's remark, the silence of a friend who withdrew. Every "you're not enough" is a memory, not a truth. And when you trace the voice to its source, compassion replaces condemnation. You stop trying to silence the critic and start trying to understand it. You realize it's not your enemy. It's a wounded part of you trying to keep you safe. The key isn't to destroy it, but to take back control of the microphone. When the critic whispers, "You failed," you respond, "I'm learning." When it says, "You're weak," you answer, "I'm growing." When it insists, "You'll never be enough," you remind it, "Enough isn't something to earn. It's something I already am." Every time you meet criticism with awareness instead of fear, the mask slips further. And beneath that mask, you find not a monster, but a frightened child, repeating what it once heard. The moment you see that, the voice softens. It no longer shouts, it asks for comfort. That's when you realize the deepest truth of emotional mastery. You were never fighting your flaws. You were fighting your own misunderstanding of yourself. The critic was never the enemy. It was the unhealed self, asking to be seen. Chapter 4: Emotional Weapons and Shields. The emotionally weak react. The emotionally strong redirect. Trick 16. The emotional mirror. People are not as logical as they seem. They are mirrors, soft surfaces reflecting the emotional light that falls on them. You smile, they soften. You tense, they tense. You panic, they panic. This is the hidden current that drives every interaction. Your energy doesn't stay with you. It ripples outward, infecting rooms, shaping moods, bending outcomes, often without a single word spoken. You've seen it happen. A confident person enters a room, and everyone unconsciously straightens up. Their presence alone recalibrates the emotional climate. That's not charisma. That's emotional projection. What you carry inside, you broadcast outside. It's called emotional contagion, and psychologists have proven it countless times. When two people interact, their nervous systems begin to synchronize. Heartbeat, breathing rhythm, even micro-expressions. You think you're responding to what someone says, but in truth, you're responding to how their nervous system feels. That's why calm is contagious, and so is chaos. Most people are emotional mirrors without realizing it. They absorb whatever energy dominates the space. This means whoever maintains inner composure controls the external atmosphere. The emotionally grounded person becomes the anchor, and everyone else orbits around their state. So, when someone yells, insults, provokes, the average person mirrors it back. Their tone rises, pulse races, breath shortens. The mirror shatters. But the emotionally intelligent person sees what's happening and refuses to match the vibration. They remain calm. Not passive, not submissive, deliberately calm. Because they know, whoever controls their energy, controls the outcome. When you stay calm in the presence of anger, you disarm it. When you stay grounded in the face of panic, you become the authority. When you maintain warmth in the presence of hostility, you expose the insecurity behind it. This is not spiritual idealism, it's neurological dominance. Every human nervous system seeks balance. When yours stays steady, others subconsciously adjust to match it. It's why the calm person wins arguments without raising their voice. It's why real leaders radiate quiet confidence, not noise, not theatrics, but emotional gravity. To master this, you must begin to guard your energy like currency. Before you enter a conversation, ask yourself, what emotional tone am I about to invest? Because your emotions are an exchange, a silent transaction. Every burst of anger, every defensive word, every overreaction costs something. And most of the time, it costs your peace. You don't owe anyone your emotional availability. You owe yourself your composure. When others try to manipulate you emotionally, they're not attacking your logic. They're trying to infect your emotional mirror. They want you to feel what they feel, because the moment you do, they've pulled you into their world. The only defense is awareness. When you notice someone trying to provoke, step back inside your body. Slow your breath. Drop your shoulders. Let silence do the work. Because silence breaks the emotional chain, and control quietly returns to you. Trick 17. The strategic pause. In a world addicted to noise, silence is a weapon. When used deliberately, a pause has more impact than any word. It's the invisible punctuation that makes people lean forward, question themselves, and fill the silence with their own anxiety. Most people fear silence because they equate it with weakness, as if pausing means hesitation. But real power is not in constant motion. It's in control of tempo. Every master communicator understands this. When you slow down, you take command of time itself. Think of interrogation experts, negotiators, even seasoned diplomats. They all use strategic pauses. Because silence shifts power. The brain hates uncertainty. When you pause mid-conversation, mid-question, or mid-response, the other person's brain scrambles to fill the gap. They reveal more than they intend, soften their stance, or become self-conscious. You've seen it happen in arguments. One person keeps talking, filling every second with words, while the other just watches quietly. And slowly, the talker starts to crumble under the weight of their own speech. That's not dominance through aggression. That's dominance through stillness. A well-timed pause creates three things: tension, reflection, and control. Tension, because people fear silence more than confrontation. Reflection, because it forces them to examine what they just said. Control, because whoever speaks next often concedes the frame. The strategic pause also applies to emotion. Before reacting, pause. Before replying, pause. Before assuming, pause. In that microscopic space between stimulus and response lies your freedom. It's the same principle Viktor Frankl described. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. This isn't just philosophy, it's neuroscience. When you pause, you interrupt the amygdala's automatic reaction. You give your prefrontal cortex, the logical part of your brain, a chance to regain control. A 2-second pause can mean the difference between escalation and resolution. You may not be able to control what someone says, but through silence, you can control how their words land. In argument, pause before answering. In manipulation, pause before believing. In emotion, pause before reacting. Silence isn't emptiness, it's pressure. The pause tells the other person, I am not ruled by impulse. It tells the world, I think before I move. And over time, that habit of pausing becomes a shield. It protects you from being pulled into emotional traps, from saying things you regret, from surrendering your control in moments of weakness. Mastery isn't speaking wisely, it's knowing when not to speak at all. Trick 18. The gray rock. Imagine trying to manipulate a stone. You yell at it, flatter it, guilt it, provoke it, but nothing happens. It doesn't react. It doesn't reward your effort. Eventually, you get bored and walk away. That's the gray rock method, emotional neutrality as self-defense. It's not apathy, it's strategy. You become dull, unresponsive, boring, emotionally unprofitable. Manipulators, narcissists, and emotional vampires survive on reaction. They feed off the energy you give, your outrage, your need to explain, your emotional investment. The more you react, the more they control the script. But when you stop reacting, they lose access to their fuel source. You take away the game. The key to the gray rock technique is emotional detachment without hostility. You don't argue. You don't justify. You don't feed them drama. You simply become neutral, gray, bland, uninterested. When they ask personal questions, you give short, vague answers. When they provoke, you respond with calm indifference. When they demand attention, you offer politeness, not engagement. The manipulator will test you. They'll escalate, provoke harder, accuse you of being cold or distant. They're searching for a spark, any sign that they still control your emotions. Don't give it to them. Let the silence stretch. Let the conversation die naturally. In time, they'll move on to someone more reactive, someone easier to control. The beauty of the gray rock isn't in its toughness, it's in its emptiness. By not engaging, you deny the manipulator the emotional script they need to win. But there's a subtle danger. Prolonged detachment can make you numb. That's why you use this method situationally, not permanently. It's a temporary defense, not a way of life. When you step away from manipulation, you can safely reconnect with emotion. Because emotional control doesn't mean emotional suppression. It means emotional choice. You choose who deserves your reaction. You choose when to care, when to engage, and when to disappear into stillness. The gray rock teaches the final truth of emotional strength. Control is not about domination, it's about discretion. The world will always try to provoke you, test your limits, pull you into battles that don't belong to you. But the moment you master stillness, when your emotions no longer dance to every external beat, you become untouchable. And that is where true power begins. Trick 19. The energy drain. Every argument is a transaction, not of words, but of energy. Each time you explain yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you, each time you try to prove your worth, each time you defend what peace has already confirmed, you're paying with emotional fuel. And here's the quiet truth. Most of life's exhaustion doesn't come from work, but from unnecessary emotional spending. You can go through a long day and still feel calm if your mind was still. But one pointless argument, even a short one, can leave you feeling hollow for hours. That's the cost of emotional leakage. You don't lose energy because life is difficult. You lose it because you keep lighting small fires just to feel seen in the dark. Every human being runs on an internal battery. It powers thought, focus, creativity, and presence. But arguments, especially those driven by ego, drain that battery faster than anything else. Because when you argue, your nervous system enters fight mode. Your heartbeat rises. Cortisol floods your bloodstream. Your brain replays the conflict long after it's over. You tell yourself you've moved on, but your body hasn't. It's still fighting ghosts. That's why some people feel constantly tired. Not because they do too much, but because they feel too much without filtering. You must understand, not every battle deserves your emotional ammunition. There's a difference between defending your values and defending your pride. The first strengthens you. The second consumes you. So before reacting, ask yourself, is this worth my peace? If the answer is no, then walk away. Not with arrogance, not with bitterness, just quiet certainty. Because silence is not surrender, it's self-preservation. Most arguments are invitations to chaos disguised as debates. They're traps, designed to pull you down to someone else's frequency. And the moment you respond emotionally, you're no longer guiding the conversation. You're being guided by it. But when you choose not to engage, when you keep your composure instead of defending your ego, you create distance between reaction and control. You take your energy back. This isn't about being passive. It's about being strategic. You save your emotional fuel for where it matters: growth, creation, purpose, peace. Because every reaction has a cost. And peace, once lost, takes time to rebuild. So the next time someone tries to provoke you, pause. Not every message needs a reply. Not every insult deserves clarity. Not every misunderstanding is yours to fix. The more selective you become with your energy, the more powerful you become in silence. Peace isn't found by avoiding people. It's found by mastering the art of non-reaction. And once you stop feeding emotional chaos, it starves on its own. Trick 20. The Stoic Detachment. Emotions are waves. Beautiful, powerful, but temporary. Most people drown in them because they mistake feeling for truth. They think, if I feel it, it must mean something. But emotion isn't instruction. It's information. This is where Stoic detachment begins. Not as coldness, not as denial, but as a form of emotional discipline. The Stoics never taught to kill emotion. They taught to witness it without obedience. When anger rises, you observe it like thunder in the distance. When sadness visits, you let it sit beside you without giving it the steering wheel. When fear whispers, you listen, but you don't let it speak for you. That's detachment. It's the art of separation without suppression. You still feel deeply, but you no longer confuse emotion with identity. Because feelings are weather. You are the sky. The storm passes. The sky remains. Most people live at the mercy of their moods. They wake up peaceful until a message ruins their morning. They feel confident until someone's opinion shakes their frame. Their emotions control their direction, like winds tossing a ship without an anchor. But the detached mind moves differently. It observes first, acts second. It recognizes the wave, but waits before riding it. To practice this, start with awareness. When emotion rises, don't rush to name it or fix it. Just breathe and notice. Ask yourself, what is this feeling trying to teach me? Is it fear disguised as anger? Is it attachment disguised as love? Is it guilt disguised as responsibility? You'll begin to see how often emotions are echoes, old reflexes triggered by present moments. Detachment allows you to respond to reality, not your past. The Stoics had a phrase, amor fati, love of one's fate. It means embracing what happens without resistance. When you detach, you stop fighting life. You stop expecting the world to match your emotional script. You begin to accept, And in that acceptance, you find strength. The detached person doesn't suppress tears. They simply don't drown in them. They don't reject joy. They just don't chase it desperately. They don't avoid pain. They just don't identify with it. That's why Stoic detachment feels like peace, because it's the end of inner argument. You no longer resist the present moment. You observe it. You understand it. And then you decide, consciously, how to act. Detachment doesn't make you distant from life. It makes you closer to it, because you finally experience it as it is, not as fear or desire distorts it. Emotional mastery doesn't mean becoming numb. It means becoming selectively alive. You choose which emotions to water, which to let fade. Because you are not your sadness. You are not your anger. You are the awareness that watches them rise and fall. And when you can sit in that awareness, when you can feel everything yet be owned by nothing, you've reached the quiet core of control. Chapter 5. The Neurology of Emotion. Emotions are not enemies. They are signals, misunderstood. Trick 21. The Chemical Symphony. Inside your skull lives an orchestra, not of instruments, but of chemicals. Each thought, each heartbeat, each sigh is part of a symphony of molecules. Dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, cortisol, tiny invisible forces that shape the landscape of your emotions. Most people believe they feel first, think second. But in truth, your feelings begin as chemistry. A single thought of loss releases cortisol, your body's alarm signal. A compliment floods you with dopamine, the molecule of pursuit. A warm embrace releases oxytocin, the molecule of connection. Your emotions are not magic. They are molecular conversations happening in the dark. Each chemical plays a role in the human opera. Dopamine drives anticipation, not satisfaction. It rewards you for chasing, not achieving. That's why the thrill fades right after you get what you wanted. The high lives in the hunt. Serotonin brings stability, a quiet confidence. It whispers, you are safe, you belong, you're enough. When it's low, insecurity amplifies, and your mind starts reaching outward for validation. Cortisol is the ancient warrior, necessary for alertness, deadly in excess. When it lingers, it corrodes sleep, memory, and patience. Oxytocin is trust, but it's also vulnerability. The same chemical that bonds you to a loved one can bind you to a manipulator if released in the wrong context. This is the cruel poetry of biology. The same chemicals that make love possible also make addiction inevitable. But here's the truth. Chemistry doesn't rule you. It only rules the unaware. When you understand what each emotion is doing, when you see the strings of the puppet, you begin to conduct the orchestra. Next time you feel anxiety rise, remember, that's cortisol doing its job. Don't hate it. Don't fight it. Just let it play its note, and then consciously balance it with breath, stillness, or movement. When you feel emptiness after success, that's dopamine's silence. It got you to the goal, then left. Don't chase it again. Rest. When you feel calm after a walk in nature, that's serotonin, born from rhythm, sunlight, and oxygen. When you feel warmth from a genuine conversation, that's oxytocin building the architecture of trust. This is how you reclaim emotional control, by recognizing that what feels like chaos is actually coordination. Your emotions are chemical messengers trying to guide you, not punish you. To master emotion, you must first become fluent in your body's language. And once you can listen to that internal orchestra without resistance, you stop being a victim of feeling. You become the composer. Trick 22. The feedback loop. Every emotion begins with a thought, but every thought is shaped by emotion. This is the feedback loop, the endless circle between mind and body, where one fuels the other. Think of it like this. You remember something painful. The brain releases stress hormones. Your heart rate rises. Your muscles tense. Your breathing shortens. The body sends that tension back to the brain, confirming the thought, yes, I am in danger. So the brain fires more fear signals. Round and round it goes. That's the loop, a closed circuit of self-confirming emotion. And it's how anxiety, guilt, and anger sustain themselves. Not through reality, but through repetition. The mind thinks the body reacts the body informs the mind thinks again. A perfect loop of illusion that feels real because your body keeps agreeing with your thoughts. But here's the secret. You don't need to fight the emotion. You only need to interrupt the circuit. You can do that from either side, mind or body. From the mind side, you practice awareness. You see the thought arise and label it. This is fear. This is anger. This is not truth, just chemistry. That single moment of observation breaks the automatic pattern. From the body's side, you intervene through physiology, slow breathing, relaxed posture, grounded presence. When the body calms, it sends a new message to the brain, we're safe. And the brain, believing the body, reduces the chemical response. It's emotional engineering. You don't have to suppress emotion. You just have to reprogram the signal. Every practice that cultivates inner stillness, meditation, walking, mindful breathing, works for one reason. It breaks the feedback loop. It replaces the body's panic with calm repetition until the brain learns a new pattern. This is why awareness feels like magic. Because awareness itself is interruption. When you catch yourself spiraling, in anger, jealousy, or worry, pause and ask, where is this loop starting? My thoughts or my body? Then act on that insight. Breathe slower. Drop your shoulders. Change your posture. Or shift the story your mind is telling. Your emotions aren't eternal. They're self-perpetuating systems that dissolve the moment you stop feeding them with reaction. The greatest emotional strength is not to never feel, but to never get trapped inside the loop. Trick 23. The somatic bridge. Before language, before logic, there was the body. It was your first mind, your original awareness. Long before you could describe sadness, your chest felt it. Before you could name fear, your stomach tightened. Before you could express love, your heartbeat changed rhythm. This is the somatic bridge, the connection between body and emotion. It's how your nervous system translates the intangible into the physical. Every emotion has a signature. Fear shortens the breath. Anger tightens the jaw. Shame curves the spine inward. Joy opens the chest and lifts the gaze. You cannot think your way out of emotion, but you can feel your way through it. Because your body carries what your mind tries to escape. When you suppress emotion, the body stores it. Tension becomes chronic. Muscles become memories. You begin to carry your past in your posture. That's why body awareness is more than self-care. It's emotional intelligence in physical form. Try this. When you feel overwhelmed, don't analyze. Don't justify. Just scan your body. Where is the tension living right now? Your neck? Your stomach? Your shoulders? Place your attention there and breathe into it. As oxygen enters that space, the body begins to signal safety. Muscles soften. Blood flow returns. And slowly, the emotional signal releases. This is the biological side of mindfulness, using the body as an anchor when the mind storms. Modern science confirms what ancient practices always knew. The fastest way to calm the mind is through the body. That's why techniques like yoga, tai chi, deep breathing, or even slow walking in rhythm work so powerfully. They shift your state, and the mind follows. The somatic bridge works both ways. When you relax the body, the mind listens. When you harden the body, the mind tenses. Your emotions are not abstract. They're physical events happening in real time. When you learn to feel them without fear, to witness them as signals rather than enemies, they lose their power to control you. Because you begin to understand. The body is not the prison of the mind, it's the path home. Every emotion you've ever felt has passed through this bridge. And every emotion that still hurts is waiting for you to walk back across it. So breathe. Loosen your shoulders. Let your body speak. Because sometimes, the wisest part of you doesn't use words at all. Trick 24. The labeling trick. Name it to tame it. There's a strange kind of magic in language, especially when it comes to emotions. Because when you name what you feel, you take it out of the shadows and into the light. The human brain has one major weakness. It fears the undefined. An unnamed emotion feels infinite, like a storm with no direction. But the moment you label it, your prefrontal cortex, the rational part of your brain, activates. It starts analyzing instead of drowning. This is the essence of emotional granularity. the ability to describe what you feel with precision. Most people stop at vague words like angry, sad, happy, stressed. But the truth is, those words barely scratch the surface. There's a world of difference between "I'm angry" and "I feel dismissed," between "I'm anxious" and "I feel unprepared," between "I'm sad" and "I feel disconnected." When you say, "I'm angry," you fuse your identity with the emotion. You become it. But when you say, "I feel angry," you separate yourself from it. You create distance. And when you go one step further, "I feel ignored," "I feel threatened," "I feel unseen," you transform confusion into clarity. The moment you label emotion precisely, the brain stops treating it as danger. Because you've turned chaos into information. And information is manageable. In neuroscience, this is called affect labeling. Studies using fMRI scans show that simply naming emotions reduces activity in the amygdala, the brain's fear center, and increases activity in the frontal cortex, where reasoning lives. It's like switching off the emotional alarm and turning on the lights. Here's how you can practice it. When you feel an emotional surge, pause. Don't react. Ask yourself, what is this feeling really? Go deeper each time you answer. I'm mad. Why? Because I feel disrespected. Why? Because I wanted to be understood. You've just traveled from anger to vulnerability, from explosion to truth. That's the power of labeling. It transforms reaction into recognition. Children throw tantrums because they don't yet have the words to explain what they feel. Adults aren't much different. They've just learned to disguise their tantrums as arguments, silence, or sarcasm. Language gives emotion a shape. And once it has a shape, it can be held, examined, and released. So next time you're in the middle of emotional chaos, try this mental whisper. Let's find the name. It sounds simple, but it's psychological alchemy, turning raw emotion into awareness. When you name the storm, it no longer controls the sky. Trick 25. The breathing paradox. You can't control emotion directly, but you can control what emotion listens to, the breath. Every emotion begins with breath. Every emotion ends with it. Think about the way your body breathes when you're angry, fast, shallow, from the chest. When you're anxious, quick, irregular, like you can't quite fill your lungs. When you're sad, slow, heavy, sometimes held all together. Your breath mirrors your mind. But here's the paradox. Your mind also listens to your breath. The body's simplest rhythm has direct access to your nervous system. And that's where the breathing paradox lives. You can't tell your brain, calm down. It won't listen. But you can tell your brain, you're safe, without words, by breathing slowly. When you exhale longer than you inhale, you activate the parasympathetic nervous system, the body's built-in calm mechanism. It's biology's way of saying, the threat is gone. This is why slow exhalation feels instantly grounding. It tells the heart to slow down, lowers blood pressure, and signals the brain that you've survived whatever it was bracing for. Ancient traditions discovered this truth long before neuroscience caught up. The monks who practiced pranayama, the samurai who used breath before battle, the Stoics who counted inhalations to center themselves, they all knew. Control breath, control emotion. Try it now. Inhale through your nose for 4 seconds. Hold for 1. Exhale through your mouth for 6. As you do, notice how your thoughts start to lose their sharpness. Notice how the edges of emotion soften. That's not magic. That's oxygen rewriting your state. This is how emotional regulation truly works. You don't suppress feelings. You change the physiology that sustains them. Every emotional reaction is a chemical surge. Breathing is how you tell the chemistry, we're done here. This is the paradox. You control your emotions not by force, but by rhythm. The more you try to fight the feeling, the stronger it becomes. But when you shift your breath, your body obeys, and the emotion dissolves without resistance. Think of breathing like a dialogue between the conscious and the unconscious. When you breathe shallow, you're saying, I'm unsafe. When you breathe deep and slow, you're saying, I can handle this. The body hears every message. In high-stress moments, arguments, fear, anxiety, your breath is usually the first thing to go. You hold it. You forget it. You surrender it to emotion. But the moment you remember to reclaim it, everything else follows. This is why elite soldiers, surgeons, and athletes all train their breath. Not because they're spiritual, but because they understand biology. Calm isn't mystical, it's mechanical. Emotional mastery begins at the lungs. So the next time you feel overwhelmed, don't think, don't analyze, don't argue with your mind. Just do this. Inhale, hold, exhale longer. Repeat until your heartbeat slows and your thoughts lose urgency. That's your nervous system coming home. Remember, you can't stop the waves of emotion, but you can breathe through them until they pass. That's the breathing paradox. You let go to gain control. Chapter 6, Perception Control. Reality is not what happens to you. It's what you focus on. In this chapter, we'll see how perception creates emotional worlds and how to reclaim that power. Trick 26. The spotlight bias. You think the world is watching you. It's not. Everyone's too busy watching themselves. There's a peculiar kind of suffering that lives in the human mind. The belief that you're being seen, judged, evaluated at every turn. It's why your heart races before you speak, why your hands shake when you make a mistake, why shame can feel so large it fills a room that, in truth, no one else is paying attention to. This illusion has a name, the spotlight bias. In the year 2000, researchers at Cornell University conducted a simple but brilliant experiment. They asked students to walk into a room wearing an embarrassing t-shirt, one that had a giant image of Barry Manilow on it, a singer most young people didn't find particularly cool. Afterward, they asked the students to guess how many people noticed the shirt. The average guess? Around half the room. The reality? Barely a quarter did. This is the spotlight bias. We drastically overestimate how much people notice us, our flaws, our awkwardness, our failures. We think there's a beam of light following our every move, but in truth, that light exists only in our minds. You've done it countless times. You stumble on a word in conversation and spend the next hour replaying it. You send a message and overanalyze your phrasing, convinced it sounded desperate or rude. You walk into a room and imagine everyone noticing your posture, your outfit, your mood. But here's the secret. They don't. Most people are trapped inside their own spotlights, just as you are. They're too busy worrying about how they look, how they sound, how they are being perceived. You live in your mind, and they live in theirs. The worlds rarely intersect. Understanding this doesn't just bring comfort, it brings liberation. Because once you see that the audience is mostly imaginary, your anxiety loses its stage. Next time you feel the eyes of judgment burning on you, pause. Ask yourself, is this real, or is it my projection? Remind yourself, everyone is living their own story. I'm a background character in most of them. This perspective doesn't make you insignificant. It makes you free. You can walk lighter, speak without rehearsing, exist without performing. Because the truth is, the world isn't watching you fail. It's too preoccupied trying not to fail itself. And when you realize that, you stop performing and start being. That's when your emotional control strengthens, because fear no longer holds the microphone. Trick 27. The confirmation trap. We don't see reality as it is. We see reality as we already believe it to be. The mind doesn't seek truth. It seeks comfort. It craves the feeling of being right more than the discomfort of being changed. This is the essence of the confirmation trap, one of the most powerful, invisible forces shaping your perception. It's the tendency to look for evidence that confirms your existing beliefs while ignoring everything that challenges them. If you believe people can't be trusted, you'll notice every betrayal but overlook every act of kindness. If you believe you're unlucky, you'll count every misfortune and dismiss every blessing. If you believe you're not enough, you'll collect proof of rejection but discard moments of appreciation. The confirmation trap doesn't just distort your worldview. It builds emotional cages. Because once you believe something, your mind begins to edit reality to keep that belief alive. Psychologist Peter Wason first identified this in the 1960s through what became known as the Wason Rule Discovery Test. Participants were asked to guess a pattern based on a sequence of numbers, like 2, 4, 6. Most people proposed examples that confirmed their hypothesis, 8, 10, 12, for instance, instead of testing sequences that might disprove it. In other words, they looked for validation, not truth. That same pattern repeats in everyday emotion. You think you're calm and self-aware until someone challenges you, and suddenly you feel defensive. You think you understand a situation until new information threatens your version of events, and you reject it. You think you're objective until you realize you've been collecting proof of the same story your whole life. Emotional mastery begins when curiosity replaces certainty. Try this. When you feel a strong emotion, anger, shame, pride, ask, what belief is this emotion protecting? Then, challenge it. Ask, what if the opposite were true? This is not about doubting yourself. It's about freeing yourself from the rigidity of your own narrative. Because certainty is comforting but blinding. Curiosity is unsettling but liberating. The emotionally intelligent mind doesn't cling to being right. It learns to sit in the unknown and listen. When you detach from the need to prove your story, you begin to see again. You notice nuances, possibilities, truths you missed when you were too busy defending your beliefs. That's the quiet power of awareness. It breaks the loops that emotions use to trap you. The confirmation trap loses its grip not when you find the truth, but when you become humble enough to admit you never fully had it. Trick 28. The availability illusion. What feels true isn't always what is true. Your brain is lazy. It loves shortcuts, quick judgments, simple answers, emotional certainty. So when it needs to decide what's real, it grabs whatever information is most available, the loudest, most recent, or most emotional, and mistakes it for the truth. This is the availability illusion. If you watch the news and see 3 stories about plane crashes, you'll start believing air travel is unsafe, even though statistically, it's one of the safest forms of transportation. If you hear about betrayal in relationships, you'll start suspecting deceit in your own, even when there's no evidence. If you replay your past failures in your mind, you'll convince yourself you always fail, forgetting the dozens of quiet victories your brain doesn't bother to recall. Emotion magnifies availability. What feels vivid becomes what feels true. And this is where emotional mastery comes in, learning to distrust your first emotional impression. The brain prioritizes emotional memories because they were, once upon a time, tied to survival. If you touched fire once and got burned, your mind made that pain easily retrievable, available, to protect you in the future. But in modern life, that same mechanism keeps you trapped in fear, guilt, and overreaction. You feel anxious about public speaking because one person once laughed. You avoid love because one person once left. You distrust joy because disappointment was once louder. What feels real is not always the full picture. It's just what your emotional memory has made most available. To counter the availability illusion, you must learn the discipline of evidence gathering. Ask yourself, what else could be true? What data am I not seeing because it's quiet? Emotions amplify what's near and mute what's distant. Facts, patterns, probabilities, they whisper. You have to choose to listen. The emotionally controlled mind doesn't deny feelings. It acknowledges them, then checks them. It says, I feel afraid. But is this fear about the present or the past? I feel doubt. But is this based on evidence or on memory? This process creates what psychologists call meta-awareness, the ability to observe thought without becoming it. It's what monks train in meditation and what cognitive scientists describe as the foundation of emotional intelligence. Because awareness doesn't silence emotion, it puts it in context. Think of your perception like a camera lens. Your emotions choose what's in focus, but you still hold the camera. You can zoom out, adjust the frame, change the angle. Every emotion tries to convince you that its version of reality is the only one. Fear says, you're in danger. Anger says, you've been wronged. Sadness says, it will always be this way. But perception control whispers back, maybe. Let's look closer. That whisper is where freedom lives. The availability illusion teaches you one thing above all. Your feelings are not facts. They're just data, incomplete, emotional, biased data. And when you learn to interpret them with patience instead of impulse, you begin to experience a deeper kind of calm. Because truth doesn't shout. It waits for silence. Trick 29. The perspective flip. Every discomfort is a teacher in disguise. The mind's first instinct is to avoid pain. It's ancient programming, a survival reflex. But what keeps you alive isn't always what helps you evolve. Emotional growth begins the moment you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" This is the essence of the perspective flip, a psychological alchemy that turns emotional resistance into strength training for the mind. When you lift weights, you deliberately create resistance so your muscles can grow stronger. Emotion works the same way. Each conflict, each irritation, each fear, they're emotional weights. Most people drop them immediately, but those who can hold them, breathe through them, and analyze them, they grow. The truth is, discomfort is not the enemy. It's feedback. That frustration when someone interrupts you, training for patience. That anxiety before a risk, training for courage. That heartbreak you think will destroy you, training for emotional resilience. Every time you face discomfort without escaping it, your tolerance expands. Your emotional threshold widens. The next time it happens, it hurts a little less. Not because life got easier, but because you got stronger. This is how Stoics viewed adversity. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Every obstacle was fuel. Every insult, every loss, every disappointment, a weight on the barbell of the soul. But most people never realize this. They interpret conflict as chaos, not conditioning. They mistake discomfort for danger. Imagine if you saw every argument not as an attack, but as training for composure. Every delay not as frustration, but as training for patience. Every rejection not as humiliation, but as training for humility. Suddenly, life stops being something that happens to you and becomes something that happens for you. The perspective flip doesn't deny pain. It redefines it. It's the ability to say, "Yes, this hurts. But maybe this is how I learn to stop running from hurt." Think of emotional mastery like calluses, formed not by avoiding friction, but by enduring it long enough to adapt. Your triggers are teachers. Your discomfort is curriculum. Your peace is the diploma you earn when you stop dropping out of emotional school. So the next time you feel overwhelmed, ask yourself, what is this training me for? Because it always is. And once you learn to see discomfort not as punishment, but as preparation, no challenge can truly unseat your calm. Trick 30. The observer's chair. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness noticing them. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine you're sitting in a quiet theater. On the screen in front of you, your life is playing. Scenes of anger, fear, excitement, regret. You watch yourself move, speak, react. You feel the emotions arise, but you don't interfere. You just observe. This is the observer's chair, the ability to watch your emotions without becoming them. Most people don't live this way. They live inside their emotions, drowning in every wave. When anger comes, they are anger. When sadness comes, they are sadness. When anxiety comes, it feels like their entire identity. But the moment you take the observer's seat, everything changes. Because from that vantage point, you realize emotions are temporary weather patterns. You are the sky. This practice has roots in both psychology and spirituality. In mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, it's called decentering, stepping back from your thoughts to view them as mental events rather than facts. In Buddhism, it's called witness consciousness, becoming the silent observer behind the mind's noise. In neuroscience, it's linked to activation of the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that regulates impulse and self-reflection. When you become the observer, emotion loses its grip. Because emotion thrives on identification. It says, "I am angry." But the observer whispers, "I notice anger." That single word shift, from "I am" to "I notice," creates psychological distance. And in that distance, peace enters. Next time you feel overwhelmed, visualize yourself stepping out of your body, just for a moment. See yourself as a character in a film, caught in a powerful scene. Observe how your shoulders tighten, how your breath changes, how your voice wants to rise. And then, simply watch. No judgment, no fixing, no analysis, just observation. It's strange at first, this feeling of being both the actor and the audience. But that's the secret of emotional mastery, to realize you are not just the role, you're also the director watching it unfold. When you observe, your reactions slow down. You create space between stimulus and response, the space where awareness lives. That's where control begins. Because emotional control isn't suppression, it's perspective. And perspective is impossible when you're tangled inside the experience. So step out. Sit down in the observer's chair. Watch the show. You'll see that most emotions dissolve on their own when you stop feeding them with identification. They only stay alive when you keep saying, "This is me." You are not your anger. You are the awareness that feels it rise and fade. You are not your fear. You are the stillness beneath it. You are not your sadness. You are the space that holds it gently until it passes. Practice this daily, even in small moments. When you feel impatient in line, observe. When you feel defensive in conversation, observe. When you feel shame creeping in, observe. Eventually, observation becomes your default state. Calm, detached, aware. And once you can watch your emotions like passing weather, they lose their power to control your inner climate. That's emotional mastery, not numbness, but neutrality. Not detachment from life, but detachment from illusion. The observer's chair isn't an escape from emotion. It's a higher seat from which you can finally see emotion clearly and choose how to respond instead of being dragged along. Chapter 7. The Linguistics of Emotion. Words are spells. Every thought is a silent command. This chapter explores how language, internal and external, programs emotional reality. Trick 31. The internal monologue. That voice in your head, the one narrating your day, judging your choices, replaying old conversations. It's not just thought. It's a broadcast to your nervous system. Every word, every tone, every phrase carries emotional weight. The brain doesn't distinguish between an external insult and an internal one. When you say, "I'm such an idiot," your body reacts as if someone shouted it at you. Your heart rate spikes. Cortisol rises. Muscles tense. You have just bullied yourself, chemically. Most people don't realize that their internal dialogue is their emotional baseline. The voice inside them becomes the weather of their nervous system. If that voice is harsh, your body stays in storm mode, alert, tense, defensive. If that voice is kind, calm, forgiving, your physiology follows. But here's the problem. We inherit our tone. It's copied from the world around us. Parents, teachers, authority figures, they imprint their emotional language onto us. When you hear that critical whisper in your head, it often isn't your voice. It's an echo of someone else's disapproval, still looping decades later. So the practice begins not with changing words, but changing tone. Say you make a mistake. Your automatic thought might be, "I can't believe I did that. I'm so stupid." Pause. Listen. Don't fight it. Just notice it. Then, reframe the tone, not the message. Instead of shouting at yourself internally, speak like you would to a child learning something new. "All right, that didn't go as planned. Let's fix it." This tiny shift rewires emotional safety. When your nervous system hears safety in your voice, even if it's your own voice, it relaxes. That's emotional mastery, not silence of thought, but sovereignty of tone. Train it. Speak softly to yourself when everything in you wants to rage. Be gentle when you fail, because your nervous system is always listening, not to your words, but to your music. Trick 32. The emotional label. We think words describe emotions. In truth, they create them. Language doesn't just express feeling, it defines its borders. Call yourself angry, and the body prepares for war. Call yourself nervous, and the heart quickens. But call it excited, and suddenly the same sensation, fast heartbeat, adrenaline, becomes energy, readiness, life. This is called emotional granularity, the ability to name feelings precisely. And it's one of the most underrated tools of emotional intelligence. Because the more accurate your language, the more control you have over your experience. Most people live in vague emotional fogs. Everything uncomfortable becomes stress. Everything heavy becomes sad. But stress could mean frustration, pressure, anticipation, fear, or even excitement, each requiring a different response. Without clear labels, we react blindly. Imagine a painter who only knows two colors, black and white. His emotional world is dull, limited, binary. But when he learns new shades, crimson, ivory, shadow gray, his world expands. Same canvas, richer reality. That's what happens when you start labeling emotions more precisely. Instead of "I'm angry," try "I feel disrespected." Instead of "I'm sad," try "I feel unseen." Instead of "I'm anxious," try "I'm uncertain." Each shift moves the emotion from chaos to clarity, from reaction to understanding. But here's the real power. Labels also shape identity. When you say, "I'm anxious," you merge with the feeling. It becomes who you are. When you say, "I feel anxious," you create distance. You remain the observer, not the storm. Language determines ownership. I am is identity. I feel is experience. Never confuse the two. So next time your body floods with emotion, resist the urge to simplify. Become a detective of your own feelings. Give them names, shapes, textures. The moment you name the monster, it stops being fog and becomes form. And what is form can be faced. Trick 33. The repetition principle. The mind learns through rhythm, not logic. Every belief you hold today was built not by truth, but by repetition. Think about it. You didn't wake up one morning believing you're not good enough. You heard it, directly or indirectly, enough times that your brain carved it into fact. Every repetition strengthens the neural circuit, like walking the same forest trail until it becomes a path. Eventually, your mind doesn't even think. It just follows the trail automatically. That's why affirmations exist. Not because they're mystical or magical, but because they exploit this neurological rhythm. The brain can't tell the difference between repeated truth and repeated fiction. It only records frequency. The more a thought is rehearsed, the more real it feels. But there's a problem with how most people use affirmations. They repeat words they don't feel. They say, "I am confident," while their body whispers, "No, you're not." That dissonance breeds resistance. The subconscious rejects it. So here's the deeper principle. Don't repeat what you don't believe. Repeat what you can become. If "I am confident" feels fake, say, "I am learning to trust myself." If "I am strong" feels distant, say, "I am getting stronger every day." You're aligning language with emotional truth. And when alignment meets repetition, transformation begins. The repetition principle doesn't just apply to self-talk. It governs everything. The shows you watch, the content you scroll, the people you surround yourself with. All of it programs emotional reality. Your environment repeats messages until your brain absorbs them as truth. That's why awareness is the ultimate filter. If you constantly hear negativity, your nervous system normalizes threat. If you repeat gratitude, your brain starts scanning for blessings. Whatever you rehearse becomes your emotional reflex. In ancient traditions, mantras weren't magic spells, they were training signals. Repeated sound reshaped focus, which reshaped feeling, which reshaped being. The modern brain isn't much different. So practice deliberate repetition. Speak softly to yourself, daily, rhythmically, intentionally, not for motivation, but for reprogramming. Because the brain learns through practice, not persuasion. And here's the secret. Repetition works both ways. Every time you replay a painful memory, you're affirming the pain. Every time you ruminate on guilt or fear, you're rehearsing it, strengthening the emotional muscle of suffering. You don't just need positive affirmations. You need to stop the negative ones you unconsciously chant. You are affirming something all the time. The question is, what are you rehearsing right now? Trick 34. The linguistic trap. Words are weapons disguised as conversation. Most people think manipulation happens through tone, posture, or charm. But the most powerful form is linguistic. Because words don't just describe reality, they define it. Whoever controls the frame of language controls the emotional truth that follows. Think about how easily a phrase can shift your state. Someone says, "You always overreact." Instantly, your mind doesn't question the accuracy, it jumps to defend. The word always traps you. It turns one moment into a permanent identity. You move from discussing behavior to defending your character. That's the linguistic trap. Manipulators use language to bypass logic and trigger emotion. They know that phrasing, not facts, decides how you feel. They say, "You should be grateful," and suddenly your guilt replaces your anger. They say, "You're too sensitive," and your attention moves from their cruelty to your reaction. They say, "I was only joking," and your confusion silences you. Each phrase reframes the emotional playing field, and once you accept their framing, you lose control of your own state. The defense isn't to fight back with louder words, it's to translate in real time. When someone says, "You're overreacting," translate it as, "You're having an emotion I don't want to deal with." When they say, "You're too much," here, "My capacity for honesty is too little." When they say, "You've changed," here, "You've stopped serving my comfort." Reframing restores sovereignty. It takes the sting out of language by revealing the hidden intent beneath it. Because linguistic traps only work when you accept the words as truth. The moment you see them as construction, not reality, the spell breaks. There's another side to this: how language shapes expectation. In negotiation, people say, "Let's be realistic," to shrink possibility. In arguments, they use absolutes: never, always, everyone thinks, to box you in. In persuasion, they use contrasts: compared to that, this isn't so bad, to make you accept less. But here's the rule: awareness neutralizes influence. When you begin hearing words structurally instead of emotionally, you see the scaffolding behind manipulation. You stop reacting to the story and start analyzing the syntax. Someone says, "I'm disappointed in you." You don't drown in guilt. You examine it. Disappointed compared to what? By whose standard? Why should their disappointment define your worth? You've just broken the emotional chain by questioning the grammar of control. The linguistic trap is everywhere. In media headlines designed to trigger outrage, in relationships shaped by passive aggression, in self-talk soaked in limitation. But the ultimate liberation is not silence, it's translation. Every phrase you hear is a frame. Decide which ones deserve to enter your nervous system. Because the moment you stop absorbing language and start decoding it, the emotional leash snaps. Trick 35. The story rewrite. Memory is not history. It's a screenplay rewritten every time you remember it. The past isn't fixed, it's edited in the present. You don't remember events, you remember your last version of them. And that version was shaped by who you were when you last recalled it. Your emotions, your beliefs, your maturity. That means every time you revisit the past, you have the chance to change its meaning. Painful memories survive not because of what happened, but because of the story you told yourself afterward. He left me because I wasn't enough. I failed because I'm not capable. They hurt me because I deserved it. Each sentence became an emotional script, one you've performed for years. But here's the truth: stories are optional interpretations of chaos. You can't change the event, but you can rewrite the frame. Instead of "I wasn't enough," write, "They couldn't recognize my value." Instead of "I failed," write, "I experimented and learned what didn't work." Instead of "I was broken," write, "I was being rebuilt." The brain doesn't cling to truth, it clings to meaning. Change the meaning, and the emotion rewires. This isn't denial. It's authorship. Your memories are raw footage. Your mind is the editor. And until you take control of that editing room, you live in someone else's narrative. Think of the most painful moment in your life. Now, imagine retelling it from a higher vantage point, as if you were narrating the story of someone who survived and grew. Suddenly, what was once trauma becomes training. What was lost becomes redirection. The story shifts from victimhood to evolution. And this change is not poetic, it's neurological. When you reinterpret the meaning of a memory, you alter how the brain stores it. The emotional charge weakens. The amygdala, the part of your brain that flags danger, relaxes. You've biologically rewritten pain. People often chase closure, waiting for something external, an apology, justice, explanation, to heal them. But closure isn't given. It's rewritten. It's the moment you stop waiting for a different past and start constructing a new narrative. Because your emotional world follows your storylines. Say, I'm the kind of person bad things happen to, and life keeps proving it right. Say, I'm the kind of person who survives and transforms, and your brain starts scanning for evidence of that. Every emotion needs a story to exist. Take away the story, and the emotion loses its anchor. So when guilt, shame, or regret surface, don't suppress them. Rewrite the story they belong to. Tell it again, slower, wiser, with compassion. Because the story you repeat is the life you relive. And when you begin consciously rewriting your stories, you stop being a prisoner of the past and become the author of your emotional architecture. Chapter 8. Designing Emotional State. The ultimate control is creation. How to consciously design calm, confidence, and focus instead of waiting for them. Trick 36. The emotional anchor. Every feeling you've ever had lives in your nervous system, waiting for a signal to return. A song, a smell, a certain time of day. And suddenly, without warning, the emotion attached to that cue awakens like it never left. That's because the mind doesn't separate emotion from environment. It fuses them. When you were happy, your brain recorded not just the event, but the lighting, the scent, the sound, the texture of the air. These became anchors. Touch one, and the whole emotional state resurfaces. This is not mysticism. It's conditioning. The same principle Pavlov used when he rang a bell and made dogs salivate. But you can use it consciously. Think of emotional anchors as levers. You can pull one to return to peace, another to awaken focus, another to release fear. It starts with observation. When you feel grounded, what's around you? What music plays? What posture do you hold? What scent fills the air? Capture that moment. Repeat it, and the body begins to associate those cues with calm. Over time, you'll build your own triggers of stability. Maybe a slow instrumental track you play before every challenge. Maybe a particular scent you use while meditating or studying. Maybe a deep breath, followed by unclenching your jaw, a ritual that signals safety to your body. Anchoring is about designing familiarity. The nervous system relaxes when it recognizes patterns it associates with safety. So give it those patterns intentionally. This is what elite performers do. A tennis player bounces the ball 3 times before serving, not out of superstition, but to anchor focus. A speaker touches their fingertips before walking on stage, not ritual, but cueing the state of calm control. A soldier breathes rhythmically before action, programming composure into chaos. The power is not in the ritual. It's in what your mind links to it. When you pair a sensory cue with an emotion repeatedly, the brain no longer waits for circumstance. It obeys command. And one day, when life hits you with panic or noise, you'll touch that anchor, the scent, the sound, the gesture, and feel the body remember calm. Not because calm suddenly appeared, but because you built it into your design. Trick 37. The reverse association. We are taught to run from discomfort, to label fear as weakness, anxiety as danger, pain as failure. But discomfort is data. It's not the enemy. It's a signal. Your brain evolved to feel anxiety before anything that mattered. Danger, confrontation, change. That's not dysfunction. That's alertness. But in the modern world, where danger is more emotional than physical, we mistake activation for alarm. The body tenses before a presentation, before a risk, before telling someone the truth, and you say, I'm anxious. But what if that same sensation was read differently? Reinterpretation is emotional alchemy. The same heartbeat that means fear can mean readiness. The same shaking hands that mean panic can mean energy. The same adrenaline that means run can mean rise. This is the reverse association, the art of transforming emotional discomfort into fuel. When anxiety appears, don't chase calm immediately. Pause. Ask, what is this feeling trying to prepare me for? The body is saying, we're entering something meaningful. That's not something to suppress. that's something to honor. Professional athletes use this instinctively. They don't aim to feel nothing before a game. They reframe the nerves as focus sharpening their senses. Performers don't try to silence the heart's pounding. They let it become rhythm. Surgeons, soldiers, pilots, all operate under elevated stress. Their secret isn't lack of emotion, it's reinterpretation. If you always see discomfort as danger, your body becomes your cage. But if you see it as signal, your body becomes your compass. So the next time anxiety rises, breathe and say, "My system is preparing me to act." When fear whispers, reply, "This means I care." When tension builds, remember, this is energy waiting for direction. The reverse association trains your nervous system to stop seeing emotional activation as threat. Over time, the brain rewires. The fear response becomes the focus response. You no longer collapse into emotion, you channel it. That's real control, not killing the feeling, but converting it. And when you learn to welcome discomfort, it loses the power to control you, because now it works for you. Trick 38. The reward rewire. Every action you take is a trade between discomfort and reward. And in that trade, your brain is always asking one question: what do I get if I endure this? The reason most people can't stay disciplined isn't because they're weak. It's because their brain hasn't been taught that discipline itself is rewarding. See, the mind was never designed for delayed gratification. When you scroll, snack, or vent, you're not broken. You're just obeying dopamine. That molecule doesn't care about meaning. It only cares about the anticipation of reward. But the good news is, dopamine can be retrained. You can teach your brain to associate the process with pleasure, not just the outcome. When you start to feel a rush from the effort itself, not just the result, you've entered the realm of mastery. This is the reward rewire, the transformation of discipline into dopamine. Start small. Each time you resist a distraction, consciously note the calm that follows. Each time you finish a task you wanted to avoid, pause and savor the feeling of closure. Each time you choose patience over reaction, notice the stillness it brings. You're not waiting for the world to reward you. You're teaching your brain to reward self-control. Neuroscientifically, this works through reinforcement. When you acknowledge the internal satisfaction of restraint, you trigger a micro-release of dopamine tied to discipline itself. Over time, the brain learns control equals pleasure. Monks, athletes, scientists, writers, all share this secret. They've trained themselves to find reward in focus, not distraction. When they wake early, their satisfaction isn't from the alarm, it's from keeping the promise. When they meditate, the pleasure isn't in silence, it's in awareness. When they work long hours, it's not punishment, it's devotion to a higher signal. The world's most centered people don't escape emotion. They design their chemical feedback loop. And once you master this rewire, you realize how emotional control truly works. You don't fight impulses. You reprogram what feels good. Instead of craving escape, you crave alignment. Instead of chasing stimulation, you chase stability. Instead of waiting for motivation, you build it molecule by molecule. Because when discipline and dopamine unite, freedom begins. You stop needing external validation to act. You stop waiting for the right mood to move. You become self-generating, an emotional ecosystem sustained from within. And that's the quiet truth behind emotional control. It's not suppression, not resistance, not rigidity. It's the gentle art of designing the chemistry of your own peace. So build your anchors. Reframe your fear. Reward your restraint. Because creation, not reaction, is where true control lives. Trick 39. The minimalist mind. Every distraction costs emotion. Every unnecessary choice drains clarity. And every fragment of noise, digital, mental, or emotional, fractures your ability to remain whole. Most people confuse stimulation with aliveness. They chase constant movement, constant input, constant engagement, mistaking busyness for purpose. But here's the truth. Emotional chaos doesn't come from what's happening around you. It comes from the volume of what you allow inside. The human brain was not designed to hold infinite tabs open. Each thought demands energy. Each unfinished idea taxes your focus. Each comparison steals a fragment of your peace. Over time, that emotional load builds until even small challenges feel unbearable, not because they are large, but because you are already full. Minimalism, then, is not an aesthetic. It's a psychological discipline. It is the art of saying no until what remains feels like silence. When you strip away the noise, your emotions finally have space to breathe. Because emotions need room, like air in the lungs. When your mind is cluttered, you don't process feelings, you compress them. You bury irritation under distraction, exhaustion under entertainment, loneliness under constant scrolling. But silence has a way of revealing what you've been running from. And in that revelation, you regain control. Simplicity is clarity, and clarity is emotional power. Consider your digital world, the endless stream of notifications, headlines, opinions. Every ping is a micro-injection of adrenaline. You're not aware of it, but your nervous system is. It's reacting, recalibrating, anticipating, thousands of times a day. The cost isn't time. It's emotional fatigue. You can't build emotional control in chaos. The calmest minds are not empty. They are organized. A minimalist mind has boundaries, mental, emotional, and environmental. It asks before every commitment, does this serve my peace or sabotage it? It learns to leave conversations that go nowhere, arguments that don't heal, ambitions that don't align. To cultivate it, start with subtraction. Fewer screens, fewer obligations, fewer people who drain your energy in the name of familiarity. When you remove what doesn't matter, what does becomes luminous. You stop reacting to every ripple and start perceiving the deeper current. You begin to see that not every battle deserves your fire, some only deserve your silence. Because control isn't the ability to dominate every situation. Control is the ability to remain undisturbed while the world spins. And that begins when you stop consuming more than your mind can carry. So declutter your room. Declutter your phone. Declutter your emotions. Not as an escape, but as a return to stillness, to focus, to yourself. Because minimalism isn't about owning less. It's about feeling more of what's real. And in that simplicity, you rediscover the quiet center where emotion no longer controls you. Because there is finally space to choose your response. Trick 40. The flow state. There is a place beyond thought, where doing replaces thinking and time dissolves. It's called flow. In flow, emotion doesn't vanish, it synchronizes. Every movement feels precise, every decision effortless. You're not observing yourself. You've become the act itself. This state is not mystical. It's neurological, the perfect alignment of focus, challenge, and skill. When what you're doing is just difficult enough to demand all of you, but not so hard that it overwhelms you, the mind enters full immersion. The prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for self-criticism, fear, and doubt, goes quiet. The chatter fades. The observer dissolves. And what remains is pure awareness, action without interference. In flow, you stop controlling emotions because you no longer need to. The mind and body synchronize like instruments playing the same note. You're not trying to be calm, confident, or disciplined. You are those things. This is the paradox of emotional mastery. The more you chase control, the more elusive it becomes. But when you lose yourself in meaningful action, control happens naturally. Flow isn't limited to art or sport. It can exist anywhere. Writing an idea that grips you, building something with your hands, even holding a conversation where time disappears. The key is absorption. When attention deepens, self-consciousness dies. Yet modern life kills flow. Constant interruptions, dopamine spikes, and fractured attention scatter awareness before it can merge with action. The mind becomes addicted to fragmentation, afraid of silence. To reclaim flow, you must retrain your nervous system for depth. That means designing space for uninterrupted focus. No multitasking, no notifications, no background noise. Give your attention one thing, completely, and stay there long enough for the boundary between you and it to blur. At first, it's uncomfortable. The mind resists depth because it's addicted to novelty. It will whisper, check your phone, get a drink, Look away. But if you stay just long enough, you'll feel the shift. The noise dims. The rhythm takes over. And in that rhythm, emotion transforms from something you manage to something that moves through you. Flow is the natural state of a clear mind. You don't find it by seeking pleasure or avoiding pain. You find it by surrendering to meaningful motion, where effort and ease become one. When you're fully in it, you stop asking, am I happy? Am I calm? Am I doing well? Because those questions belong to the watcher, the ego sitting outside the experience. In flow, there is no watcher. There is only doing. And ironically, this is where the highest peace lives, not in stillness, but in seamless motion, not in withdrawal, but in full participation. To live often in flow, structure your life around it. Work on things that challenge you slightly beyond comfort. Create rituals that signal your brain, it's time to enter depth. Protect your focus as sacred, because every interruption steals more than time, it steals presence. The emotional benefit of flow is profound. It silences rumination. It balances chemistry. It trains your nervous system to find joy in absorption rather than distraction. It turns control into participation. And in that participation, something shifts. The line between you and your experience dissolves. Emotion doesn't rule you because emotion becomes motion. So when you next feel restless, fragmented, or unanchored, don't seek escape. Seek flow. Find the activity that demands your full self and lose yourself in it. That's not running away from life. That's merging with it. Because the final stage of emotional control is not dominance. It's disappearance. When the watcher dissolves, peace begins. Chapter 9. The Social Psychology of Control. Every interaction is an exchange of emotional energy. Understanding emotional control in conversation, conflict, and relationships. Trick 41. The Emotional Contagion. You absorb moods like perfume. Conscious separation is emotional hygiene. Walk into a room full of anxious people, and your heartbeat quickens. Sit beside someone radiating calm, and your breath slows. This isn't imagination, it's biology. Humans are emotional mirrors. Through a process called emotional contagion, your brain's mirror neurons replicate the feelings it perceives in others. You don't just notice emotion, you catch it. That's why spending an hour with someone negative feels draining even if nothing bad happened. Your nervous system synchronizes with theirs, tone, posture, rhythm, until their emotional chaos becomes your own. Most people live unaware of this transfer. They treat emotion as self-generated, never realizing how much of it is borrowed. This is why emotional control in solitude often collapses in company. You've mastered your thoughts, but not your exposure. The first step to mastering emotional contagion is awareness. Notice your internal state before entering a social space. Then notice how it shifts afterward. Did you become tense after that conversation? Did your clarity fade after scrolling through outrage online? That's contagion. The antidote is conscious separation, what I call emotional hygiene. Just as you wash your hands after touching something dirty, you must cleanse your mind after absorbing others' moods. How? Through ritual separation. When leaving a tense environment, pause. Take one deep, deliberate breath and visualize the energy leaving your body. When finishing a draining conversation, don't immediately text or scroll. Let your mind reset. When dealing with someone chronically negative, imagine a subtle boundary between your emotional field and theirs. This isn't detachment, it's discernment. You're not rejecting empathy, you're refusing contamination. Because control doesn't mean feeling nothing, it means choosing what to feel. Once you master this awareness, something profound happens. You stop being infected by emotion and start influencing it. Your calm becomes contagious. Your stability begins to rewrite the emotional tone of the room. Emotional control, then, becomes a kind of quiet leadership, invisible but deeply felt. Trick 42. The Vulnerability Paradox. Strategic openness disarms manipulation. Vulnerability is not weakness, it's direction. In a world that glorifies emotional armor, vulnerability feels dangerous. We fear that revealing emotion makes us targets for judgment or control. So we build walls, intellectual ones, sarcastic ones, polite ones. But here's the paradox. When you hide everything, you don't protect yourself. You become predictable. Manipulators thrive on resistance. They push against the walls you build because resistance gives them leverage. Vulnerability, when used consciously, removes that leverage. When you openly express truth without seeking approval or pity, manipulation collapses. Because power games depend on secrecy, on you hiding your pain, your fear, your doubt. But once you name them, they lose their hold. Think of a skilled negotiator revealing what they actually want, calmly, transparently. It disarms the other side, forcing authenticity in return. Or a person in conflict who admits, yes, that hurt me, instead of masking it with anger. Suddenly, the other person has no emotional weapon left, because you've already claimed the wound. Vulnerability isn't surrender, it's direction. It directs the emotional energy of the interaction toward honesty instead of tension. But for vulnerability to be power, it must be strategic, not impulsive. You reveal selectively, not to unload, but to clarify. You don't bleed emotion everywhere. You place it like light, exactly where it reveals truth. Here's how to master it. Know your motive. Before speaking, ask, am I sharing to connect or to be rescued? True vulnerability seeks clarity, not validation. Own your emotion fully. Say, I feel anxious, not you make me anxious. The first builds connection, the second triggers defense. Stay calm in exposure. The power of vulnerability lies not in tears, but in stillness. Calm truth unsettles manipulation because it reveals self-possession even in openness. When you express yourself without fear of being seen, you become emotionally untouchable. Because no one can weaponize what you've already accepted about yourself. That's the paradox. True strength wears no armor. And once you master this, every social dynamic begins to shift. People trust you more. Manipulators retreat. And those who remain, feel your honesty as gravity. Trick 43. The power of presence. Nothing unsettles manipulation more than stillness. Emotional stillness commands space. Most people think control means speaking more, asserting more, explaining more. But in reality, the strongest presence is often silent. When you enter a room and remain fully still, not frozen, but grounded, the energy shifts. People feel it instantly. Stillness radiates authority because it signals one thing. I am not chasing approval. Manipulators, narcissists, and emotional bullies feed on reaction. They poke, provoke, and pressure, not to win logically, but to hijack your nervous system. When you react, defend, explain, argue, you've entered their frame. But when you stay still, steady breath, neutral expression, relaxed body, you disrupt the entire emotional script. Their bait falls into silence. And in that silence, control returns to you. This is what I call presence as dominance. Not dominance over others, but over the social field. Because presence doesn't compete. It absorbs. In conversation, practice this. When someone raises their voice, lower yours. When someone rushes, slow your speech. When someone tries to corner you emotionally, pause. And let silence stretch just beyond comfort. That pause is your weapon. It forces the other person to confront their own noise. Stillness is not absence, it's precision. Every movement, every word, becomes deliberate. And people instinctively respect what is deliberate because it signals awareness. Even animals sense this. A calm person can approach a panicked horse. A frantic one cannot. Presence regulates environments. It lowers threat. It commands without aggression. To cultivate this power, you must learn to anchor attention in your body. Feel your breath, your posture, the weight of your feet on the ground. This physical grounding tells your nervous system you are safe. And safety, when radiated outward, calms others. Over time, your emotional stillness becomes contagious, a subtle gravity that draws others into equilibrium. This is the opposite of manipulation. It's mastery through peace. Because true control in social dynamics isn't about bending others to your will. It's about maintaining such unshakable internal calm that others naturally recalibrate around you. Presence becomes the ultimate shield, and the ultimate invitation. A shield, because no attack finds purchase in stillness. An invitation, because calm energy feels safe, and people unconsciously align with it. Trick 44. The boundary code. Boundaries are emotional architecture. They define what energy is allowed to enter. Most people think boundaries are about distance. They're not. They're about definition. They tell the world, and your nervous system, where you end and everything else begins. Without boundaries, emotion bleeds everywhere. You absorb moods that aren't yours, agree to things you resent, and confuse empathy with obligation. The result? Emotional chaos disguised as kindness. A weak boundary doesn't make you compassionate, it makes you leaky. You start carrying other people's storms, believing it's your responsibility to calm them. But every time you rescue someone from discomfort, you abandon yourself. Boundaries are not walls, they're architecture. Walls isolate. Architecture shapes flow. It lets light in, air circulate, and still protects what matters. Think of your mind as a house. Every person who enters brings energy, their emotions, expectations, histories. If your door is always open, eventually, your home no longer feels like yours. You begin to feel restless in your own emotional space. That's why the first step in emotional mastery isn't meditation or motivation, it's definition. Ask yourself, what conversations drain me? What obligations make me shrink? What topics make me tense every time they appear? Each answer points to a place where your emotional boundary has collapsed. Setting boundaries is not about control, it's about clarity. You're simply teaching others how to treat you by treating yourself as sacred space. When you say no, you're not rejecting a person, you're protecting your energy. When you end a toxic conversation, you're not avoiding conflict, you're refusing contamination. When you choose silence instead of defending yourself, you're not weak, you're conserving power. But boundaries fail not because people violate them, but because we doubt them. Trick 45. The detachment game. Care deeply. Detach quickly. Love without losing center. You've been taught that detachment means not caring. But that's not detachment, that's avoidance. True detachment is the ability to care fully without collapsing when things change. It's emotional fluidity, the art of holding tightly enough to connect, but loosely enough to let go. Think of detachment as a mental game you play with life. The goal isn't to win every round. It's to stay centered no matter how unpredictable the moves become. Attachment says, I need this to feel complete. Detachment says, I want this, but I'll be okay if it goes. That single difference defines emotional freedom. Detachment is not coldness, it's clarity. It's the quiet awareness that love and loss, success and failure, praise and rejection are all temporary weather patterns passing through consciousness. When you understand this, you stop gripping every emotion like it's the end of the world. You start seeing experience as training, not tragedy. The detachment game begins when you realize you are not your emotions. You are the observer of them. Someone insults you, anger rises. Someone praises you, pride swells. Someone leaves, grief surfaces. But in every case, you remain constant beneath it. That awareness, the silent watcher, is detachment. To master it, you must train yourself to pause between stimulus and reaction. When something provokes you, don't immediately respond. Breathe. Observe the reaction as if it belongs to someone else. Ask, what story is this emotion trying to tell me? That single pause transforms suffering into strategy. Detachment doesn't mean you don't feel, it means you don't drown. You can love someone deeply and still walk away when respect disappears. You can work passionately and still rest when the work is done. You can pursue goals with fire and still sleep peacefully when outcomes shift. Care deeply. Detach quickly. Because attachment without awareness turns love into fear. You start clinging, not because the thing is good, but because you're scared of who you'll be without it. But the truth is, you're always whole. Relationships, possessions, recognition, they don't complete you. They reflect you. When you forget that, you begin to chase reflection instead of essence. Here's how to play the detachment game in daily life. Detach from outcome. Replace, I need this to happen, with let's see what happens. This rewires your brain from control to curiosity, a shift that instantly lowers anxiety. Detach from identity. You are not your role, your status, your followers, or your achievements. Every identity is temporary. Detachment means flowing with evolution instead of resisting it. Detach from reaction. When triggered, don't trust the first emotion. Emotions are messengers, not masters. Observe, decode, then decide. Detach from control. Control is the ego's last defense against uncertainty. But the more you grasp, the more life slips through your fingers. True control comes from fluidity, the ability to adapt, not dominate. Imagine holding water in your hand. Grip too tightly, and it escapes. Cup your hand gently, and it remains. That's detachment. It's not about being emotionless. It's about being anchored. You can cry and still be centered. You can miss someone and still move on. You can lose something and still feel complete. Detachment transforms pain into perspective. It allows you to experience everything without being owned by anything. The reason most people suffer isn't because they love. It's because they confuse attachment for love. They believe, if this person leaves, I lose myself. But you never lose yourself. You only lose your reflection in them. Detach from the mirror, and you'll rediscover the face. In practice, detachment is not escape, it's elegance. It's emotional aikido, redirecting energy without resistance. Someone attacks you verbally? You don't absorb it. You redirect it with silence. A goal fails. You don't collapse. You observe what it taught you about process. A relationship ends. You don't chase. You thank the experience and move forward lighter. Because everything that leaves you makes space for what's next. Detachment is the opposite of indifference. Indifference closes the heart. Detachment keeps it open, but unshaken. It's the difference between holding a flame and becoming it. In love, detachment is the ability to say, I love you enough to let you be free. In work, it's the calm that says, I'll give my best, but I don't need validation. In life, it's the freedom that whispers, everything changes, and that's beautiful. Care deeply. Detach quickly. Because the goal isn't to stop feeling. The goal is to stop clinging. Attachment binds you to outcomes you can't control. Detachment returns you to the only thing you ever could, your inner state. When you master that, nothing owns you. Not people, not fear, not loss. You remain centered, soft but unbreakable. And that's emotional sovereignty, the highest form of control. Chapter 10. The Art of Emotional Transcendence. Beyond control lies peace. Trick 46. The Paradox of Acceptance. Control comes from surrender. Fighting emotion fuels it. Allowing it dissolves it. Every emotion you resist persists. You already know this. You felt it. The more you tell yourself not to feel anxious, the stronger the anxiety becomes. The more you try to get over sadness, the deeper it carves itself into you. It's not weakness, it's wiring. The nervous system doesn't respond to resistance with calm. It responds with tension. It interprets your "I shouldn't feel this way" as danger, and it amplifies the very emotion you're trying to escape. That's why control, in its truest form, begins not with force but with acceptance. Acceptance doesn't mean approval. It doesn't mean you like the emotion or agree with it. It means you're willing to see it without judgment. Imagine holding a frightened child. If you yell at the child to calm down, it cries louder. But if you kneel, open your arms, and simply say, "It's okay. I see you," the crying softens. Your emotions are no different. They are messengers, not enemies. They arrive to tell you something's happening inside, not to destroy you. But when you fight them, you lose the message. The paradox of acceptance is that by allowing what is, you change what it becomes. Anger, when allowed, reveals boundaries. Fear, when accepted, reveals what you value. Sadness, when held, reveals what you've loved. Every emotion carries wisdom underneath the discomfort. The problem is not emotion, it's your resistance to it. The practice of acceptance begins with naming. When emotion arises, pause. Instead of running, ask, what is this trying to tell me? And more importantly, can I let this be here for a moment? That single act transforms chaos into observation. The mind relaxes. The body loosens. Because when you stop resisting the wave, you begin to float. You were never meant to fight the ocean. You were meant to learn how to breathe within it. Control doesn't come from suppression. It comes from surrender. The moment you stop trying to change what you feel, the emotion begins to change on its own. Acceptance is not passive. It's the highest form of intelligence. It means you've stopped trying to control the weather inside you, and instead learn to dance in the rain. And in that dance, soft, silent, honest, you discover the first taste of real peace. Trick 47. The observer self. Who watches the emotion? That is you. The deeper awareness untouched by reaction. Close your eyes for a moment. Notice the thoughts moving through your mind. The small internal voice narrating this moment. The sensations in your body, warmth, breath, pulse. Now ask yourself, who is noticing all of this? There is something, a stillness, behind it all. You are not the thought. You are not the emotion. You are the one who sees it. That awareness, the silent witness, is what the ancient mystics called the observer self. It's the dimension of consciousness untouched by the storm. In neuroscience, we might call it meta-awareness. In meditation, it's the watcher. In psychology, it's the space between stimulus and response. But whatever name you give it, it's the same truth. There is a part of you that cannot be triggered. That part is not reactive. It doesn't argue, defend, or panic. It just observes. It's the sky, vast, calm, unbothered, while emotions are the passing clouds. Most people live inside the clouds. They identify with every passing mood, every flicker of thought. I am angry. I am afraid. I am broken. But the observer doesn't speak in those absolutes. It says, anger is arising. Do you feel the difference? I am angry means you've become the emotion. Anger is arising means you're watching it come and go. And everything that can come and go is not you. The observer self is the essence of emotional transcendence, not because it avoids emotion, but because it's aware of it without drowning in it. From this space, reaction becomes choice. Pain becomes signal. Conflict becomes mirror. You begin to live as consciousness itself, not as the puppet of emotion, but as the witness of it. This awareness is not found by force. You don't create the observer. You remember it. It's been there since the beginning, behind every thought you've ever had. You can touch it in small moments, the pause between breaths, the silence after laughter, the stillness before sleep. That's where the observer lives. And once you recognize it, your relationship with emotion changes forever. Because when sadness comes, you see it. When anger flares, you watch it. When fear rises, you breathe through it. And when joy arrives, you appreciate it, but you don't cling. You understand that all of it, every emotion, every reaction, every story, passes through the same open sky of awareness. And you are that sky. The clouds can't stain it. The storms can't destroy it. The observer remains untouched. When you anchor yourself in that awareness, life stops feeling like a battlefield. You realize you don't need to win every emotional war, because you were never in the war to begin with. The moment you shift from I am this emotion to I am watching this emotion, freedom begins. And once you've lived even 1 second in that state of pure observation, you understand what peace really means. Trick 48. The shadow integration. Forgive the parts of you you've hidden. Integration ends the inner civil war. You spend your life building a mask, the version of yourself that fits into the world. The kind one, the strong one, the competent one. But beneath that mask live the exiled parts: anger, envy, fear, selfishness, shame. The traits you've disowned because someone once told you they were bad. This is your shadow, the unseen half of your psyche described by Carl Jung. It's everything you've pushed away in order to be loved. And here's the irony. The more you suppress your shadow, the stronger it becomes. What you reject doesn't disappear. It goes underground, gathering power in the dark. That's why people who insist they're never angry often erupt in rage. Those who say they're never jealous silently compete with everyone around them. Those who appear endlessly nice sometimes carry hidden resentment. The shadow doesn't vanish because you deny it. It hides. waiting for the moment you're too tired to keep pretending. Integration begins when you stop running from it. When you finally turn toward those darker parts and say, I see you. You belong too. Because every shadow once had a purpose. Your anger protected your boundaries before you had words. Your envy showed you what you truly desired. Your pride helped you survive when you felt invisible. These parts are not evil, they're wounded. They became distorted trying to defend you. Forgiveness is not about excusing their behavior. It's about understanding their origin. The child who learned to hide sadness now struggles to show vulnerability. The teen who was mocked for speaking truth now fears expression. The adult who was punished for needing love now calls it weakness. Shadow work is the process of bringing light to these hidden chambers. You sit with them, one by one. You ask what they've been trying to tell you. And when they finally speak, you listen, without judgment, without correction. Integration means you no longer divide yourself into good and bad. You become whole, because you can't selectively numb emotions. If you silence anger, you also silence passion. If you suppress fear, you also dull intuition. If you deny sadness, you also lose depth. To integrate is to reclaim your full spectrum, to stand in your contradictions and still say, I am complete. When you stop fighting your shadow, it stops fighting you. The inner civil war ends. Energy once spent on hiding becomes energy for healing. And the emotions that once controlled you become tools for understanding yourself. You realize you were never broken, only divided. The shadow is not your enemy. It's your teacher. It shows you where love has not yet reached, where compassion must begin. Because emotional transcendence is not rising above your humanity. It's embracing all of it, the light, the dark, the beautiful, the flawed, and knowing none of it defines you. When you can look at your darkest part and say, you are safe with me, you've already won the game the world keeps losing, the game of pretending. Integration doesn't make you perfect. It makes you real. And real people, the ones who've met their own shadow and stayed, they are the calmest souls you'll ever meet. They don't seek control. They radiate peace. Because they've learned the secret most never do. You can't control what you haven't loved. And you can't love what you refuse to see. When you finally see everything, and love it anyway, you transcend. Trick 49. The emotional alchemy. Pain is raw energy, chaotic, heavy, and formless. Most people try to escape it. They run toward distractions, drown it in noise, or numb it with comfort. But what if pain was never meant to be escaped? What if it was meant to be refined? That's what emotional alchemy is, transforming suffering into wisdom and chaos into clarity. Imagine a blacksmith forging a sword. The fire that melts the metal could destroy it if uncontrolled. But when directed, when the temperature, timing, and pressure are precise, the same fire creates strength. Your pain is that fire. It can burn you or build you, depending on whether you choose to feel it or fight it. Every heartbreak teaches something about attachment. Every failure reveals something about ego. Every rejection shows where your sense of worth was outsourced. Pain, at its core, is information. It tells you what still has power over you. But here's where the transformation begins. Instead of asking, why did this happen to me? Ask, what is this trying to show me? Because the moment you shift from victimhood to observation, emotion becomes data. The pain loses its poison. You start to see patterns, how the same emotional triggers repeat, how anger always hides hurt, how sadness always carries longing, how fear always guards something you value. You stop reacting to life and start decoding it. This is the essence of wisdom, not escaping suffering, but understanding it so deeply that it no longer controls you. The process is uncomfortable. It's supposed to be. Real transformation happens when the emotion fully surfaces, the shaking hands, the tight chest, the racing thoughts, and you stay with it instead of running away. That stillness inside pain is where the energy begins to shift. That's the moment of alchemy. When you stop labeling pain as bad, it becomes potential. You realize that grief is love without an outlet. Anger is truth unspoken. Anxiety is anticipation of possibility. And depression is the soul's exhaustion from pretending to be something it's not. Once you understand that, emotions lose their mystery. You begin to use them as tools. Anger to fuel boundaries, fear to sharpen focus, sadness to deepen empathy. You no longer collapse under emotion. You conduct it, like an artist working with colors, knowing each tone has purpose. Pain is the most honest mirror you'll ever face. It shows who you are without performance. But if you stare long enough, you'll notice something strange. Behind the pain is presence. Behind every emotional storm is stillness, watching, unhurt. That's who you really are. Emotional alchemy isn't pretending to be okay. It's the mastery of turning the fire inward until it illuminates instead of destroys. It's realizing that pain was never your enemy. It was your invitation to grow. Because the truth is, nothing that's deeply understood can hurt you in the same way again. Once you've extracted the lesson, the emotion completes its purpose and dissolves. That's the quiet transformation no one sees. The silent shift from reaction to realization, from suffering to strength. That's the art of emotional alchemy. Trick 50. The quiet mind. When the mind finally goes quiet, most people mistake it for emptiness. They say, I feel nothing. But it's not nothing. It's everything, finally settling into place. The quiet mind isn't dull. It's awake. It sees without commentary. It feels without story. It hears without judgment. It's the state where awareness no longer fights itself. You reach it not by force, but by surrender. Because the harder you try to quiet the mind, the louder it becomes. Thoughts multiply when resisted. Emotions intensify when denied. Control, when born from fear, becomes the very reason you lose it. So the quiet mind begins with one realization. You are not your thoughts. Thoughts are visitors. Passing weather. The noise of a brain doing what it's designed to do. Predict, remember, analyze, protect. But when you stop identifying with every passing cloud, you notice something beyond it. The sky itself, vast, still, untouched. That's you. Meditation, solitude, stillness, these aren't escapes. They are practices in remembering who's behind the noise. A quiet mind is not thoughtless. It's unhooked. It observes without attachment. When fear arises, it sees it as energy. When anger surfaces, it lets it move through. Nothing needs to be suppressed or justified. In this state, peace isn't a mood, it's your baseline. And what's most paradoxical is that, from this quiet, action becomes sharper. Focus deepens. Creativity blooms. Because all the energy once spent resisting emotion now flows freely. You begin to operate from response, not reaction. Someone insults you. The old mind would defend, argue, prove. The quiet mind sees it as vibration. Sound waves shaped by another person's suffering. It passes through you without lodging. Stress arises, the old mind tightens. The quiet mind breathes. It asks, what can I control right now? And releases what it can't. The quiet mind doesn't chase motivation. It acts from clarity. It doesn't seek validation. It recognizes its own enoughness. This is not detachment born of numbness. It's the freedom of being fully present without being consumed. Think of it as a still lake. When the surface is disturbed, you can't see the reflection of the sky. But when it settles, reality becomes clear. That's what a quiet mind does. It reflects truth without distortion. And here's the ultimate paradox. True control is no longer needing control. Because when awareness becomes deep enough, you realize there's nothing to control. Thoughts, emotions, people, outcomes. All of it arises and falls in the same field of consciousness. The only thing constant is the observer. That recognition ends the war. You stop trying to fix yourself, and instead, you start being yourself, raw, open, unfiltered. You begin to trust that even chaos has order, that every emotion has purpose, that every silence carries wisdom. This is where peace lives, not in having no problems, but in no longer needing every problem to disappear. The quiet mind does not mean the end of thought. It means the end of identification with thought. It's realizing that awareness is the still ocean beneath the waves. And once you live from that place, control transforms into harmony. You move through the world like a calm axis, steady amid movement, seeing clearly, feeling deeply, but never lost in either. The mind becomes a servant again, not a master. And in that stillness, you realize something profound. You never needed to control emotions to find peace. You only needed to stop resisting them. That is true control, not dominance, not suppression, but the serene strength of the quiet mind.